When I was a little kid, I used to listen to baseball games on the radio. Maybe I was 4 or 5 years old, and I was a Red Sox fan, and I used to listen to the games. I gravitated towards that, and I really was interested in it. And I think one day I said to my uncle, who was my mentor and sports guy and took me to games and did everything, I said, I want to be a baseball announcer. So it always stuck in my mind that that's what I wanted to be. This was my one opportunity to grab at it, and I was going to do everything possible in order to make it happen. I know my family was very late in getting a TV. My father said, I will never buy a TV until they're improved. And I kept saying, but we're not seeing any programs. Oh, it has to be perfect before we're going to buy it, which was another way of saying, we're not buying it. I kept saying, well, how much do we have to improve? How do we measure that? But, we were very late in getting, and that's probably was good for me because that meant I had to listen to more radio, growing up. So that was kind of maybe that led me in the right direction by accident, but I didn't get a chance to get exposed to too much television as a kid. I decided, because of what I felt like being in radio and everything else, I had to go to a college that offered that. But I knew that I wanted to be someplace where I could get on the air and find out if this is what I wanted to do. And so as a result, Ithaca became the school. They had a radio studio. They had a television studio. That's what attracted me. And that's where I decided I wanted to be. That's where I started, technically, my radio career. The opportunities were there. Ithaca had a rule. It wasn't a college rule. It was like a department rule. It said freshmen could not be on the radio. They could not be performers. Just freshmen. Said there's no way they're going to stop me. You have to figure out a way to get on and break the precedent. One weekend, the guys who normally do the show on the college radio station, I was a freshman, didn't show up or called in sick, and they couldn't find anybody in the studio to do it, and they made some calls out and say, we got a show, 3-hour show, whoever shows up can do it, but we need somebody quick. And I ran like crazy, got there, and I got on the air. I had never been on the air before. Doing a show, put some records on the turntable. I don't even remember what the records were, and I'm not even sure it was the format that I was supposed to be playing, but I did it. I was more interested in opening the mic and speaking, and I did a show, 3 hours. After that, freshmen could get on the air, and all of a sudden there was a rush of a bunch of freshmen who said, hey, Dave got on the air, I can be on the air too. And the thing in broadcasting is you don't turn off the station because somebody doesn't show up. Somebody's got to go in there and fill the void. That's the way it works. You can't close for the weekend. This was originally when I was doing television in my college, WICB. And those were the three of us. We were the sports anchor, and the news anchor, the sports anchor, and the weatherman. And we were seniors when we were doing this. So this was our claim to fame, so to speak. Actually, it was my last TV. I went into radio. And there was a local radio station in Ithaca, WTKO, and it was an AM daytimer. And most of the Ithaca College people that were good got part-time jobs there. We were all part-timers. They would have the regular guy who does morning and midday and afternoon, and we'd fill in all the weekends and stuff like that. And for a year and a half, almost 2 years, I got to be on the radio. So that got me my step in. I did some sports at the station later on. In my junior year, I got a full-time gig. Full-time meaning I did a show, during the week. I didn't, and maybe some commercials, but
I still could go to college. I didn't have to, I wasn't at the station 8 hours a day, maybe 4 hours a day, and I was able to work it around classes and things like that. And I did a show. I used to do afternoons, 1 to 5. That was my commercial entry into the biz, which when I graduated was my first job of graduation. I went right from one to the other. In fact, the day I graduated, I had to leave right after graduation to get back to the station for my afternoon shift. And my grandmother had come there from Boston, my 75-year-old grandmother, and my uncle and my aunt, and I had to get to the radio station to do my show.
That brings back a lot of memories. Most of this is probably from the 50s and the 60s, a little bit in the 70s, but that's where these artists were the pretty amazing. Okay.
I remember one instance at WTKO that was an absolute life changer for me, and to say that when you're 21 years old and just out of college, to say you had a life-changing incident happen is amazing. I found the documentation to prove it, which I hadn't seen in 45 years. I was working at WTKO, and I had a 1 o'clock afternoon shift. It was in November of 1964. History will tell you what it is.
I went out and bought my first automobile that morning. I had time off. I didn't have to be on the air till 1 o'clock. And I bought a brand new Volkswagen Beetle. And then I rushed back to the radio station to get on the air.
I came in, I sat down, and I wasn't in front of the mic for more than 5 minutes. And the secretary came running in, waving a piece of paper from the Associated Press wires.
I said, what's going on? What are you doing? She said, the president's been shot.
And all I could say to her is, because I thought she was kidding me, I'd never heard anybody ever say that before. And she was kind of a kidder anyway, and the laugher in the front office, and we kind of liked her. And she said, "No, it's true. Here, look it." And she handed me the Associated Press bulletin. President Kennedy got shot in Dallas. Didn't know what to say, what to do. I read the bulletin, and meantime, the boss came running in and said, "Go to the network, go to the network." So we were able to hit the switch and go to the network. But that was the first time. I mean, that was amazing. When you think about it, it wasn't that I just was around. I actually read a bulletin, probably at the same exact time everybody else in America read that same bulletin at 1:00, whatever it was, in the afternoon. And I never forgot it, ever.
I can't believe I saved that. It obviously must have meant a lot to me, and it was kind of one of those moments in your life, that you have, and I thought enough to save it. There's a lot of stuff I haven't saved that I probably should have saved, but this was one I saved.
One of my college professors called me, and this was 4 years out of college, right? He had left teaching, and he was managing a radio station in Springfield, Massachusetts. Actually Chicopee, but that's part of Springfield. His name was Richard Ferry, Dick Ferry, and I never thought he would ever have called me for anything. So Dick said, "I got a job here. You can be the afternoon disc jockey on a talk show." Telephone talk, huh? I'd never done that before. I took this job in Springfield. And that moved me out of sports. But it moved me into an area that I had never thought I would ever get into. It was telephone talk. And it was at a very, very painful time in our history. There was an anti-war movement on. There were conservatives out there who thought that the government was poisoning the water by, and other things. It was really awful. And of course, I was a young, liberal kind of guy who, you know, I had my own idea of these things. And I turned out to be the liberal guy on a radio station that a lot of conservatives listened to. And they used to threaten me, and they would, oh, I'm serious. I mean, you know, I don't know whether they were really going to do something to me, but I certainly got my attention. And they, of course, used to read all these documents on the air that were, you know, came from their conservative publications. And they would read them word for word on the air, you know, thinking trying to make me think that was their opinion, right? And I had my opinion, and they knew my opinion. I learned where they were getting their documents from, and I would get those. You didn't download. There was no downloading in those days. There were no computers in those days. I got the pamphlets and the information and the books that they read. And so when they'd call me up and start into one of their dissertations, and I would say to them, is this really your thinking? Is this really your idea? Yeah, it's my idea. And then they'd go, I said, oh, go on. And they'd go on, and then I would pick up right where they were and start reading the same thing. I said, isn't that strange? If this is your idea, how come I'm reading it from this book from the John Birch Society? And we didn't have a 7-second delay or anything. I used to have to cut the mic fast. I wanted to own a radio station. My father had read this magazine article that said you could make millions owning a radio station. I don't know where that came from. Believe me, you can't make millions. You can make millions if you own a radio station, but you have to pay $50 million to get a station that can make you $1 million. Sorry, Dad. You didn't get that quite right. We made a couple of trips to Washington, D.C. to meet with a radio station broker and to meet with a lawyer, because you buy a radio station, you need an FCC attorney. They have to file papers and do all the legal stuff before you can own. It isn't just a matter of getting your bank loan and turning on the lights. You have to have a license in your name. We looked at several radio stations. And then we got to, you know, my background was in the Finger Lakes. I had been in Auburn. I went to school in Ithaca. And there was I had done baseball broadcasts in Geneva, New York, when the Auburn played Geneva in Geneva. So I'd been to Geneva, and it was on one of the Finger Lakes, you know, a nice location. And this radio station came for sale. The owner had no idea what he was doing. He was working with a guy who I'd gone to college with, who was trying to get out of there as fast as he could. It was a disaster. So we decided we were going to buy WECQ in Geneva. It was relatively inexpensive. It was about $114,000, which was a lot of money to buy nothing. What we were buying is a tower and a license to broadcast. That's it. The community didn't even know what the radio station was. They were still supporting the AM station in town. This is where it's all going today, is FM. Although in those days, a lot of people didn't have FMs in their cars yet. Once people got FMs in their cars, FM took off. You know, but they still had them at home, and and at night they'd listen to radio, and FM had a great signal, and we had a fairly unique opportunity. And I brought in a couple of people to sell for me. I hired a couple of announcers who were from the area, who turned out to be quite good. The salespeople were having a rough time, but I had to support them because, you know, they didn't know what they were selling. And really, they didn't have much to sell. They didn't have a reputation. They didn't have a community presence. They didn't have listeners.
These were the people, these were the program directors I had. Those were the news people I had. But these were all the names of the people, and I remembered most of them, but they really put the list together. It was unbelievable. Look at this. People that worked the midday, the afternoon people. Those were usually the program directors did the afternoon shift. And the night people, they were always the characters.
So we went in and we did a kind of a quasi middle of the road radio station. It wasn't rock, it wasn't top 40. It was kind of, my theory at the time was, well, we don't want to run a format that's going to be too rock and roll because it'll upset the advertisers who won't like the music, and the bankers won't like the music, and the community leaders won't like the music. And so we started off kind of tepid. We started, started making some headway. We sold a little bit of advertising, not a lot. We decided, I brought in another program director, and I told him I wanted to be top 40. I wanted a station that was in your face, that was personality oriented, had some news, and then we were going to do community events and involvement.
Tons of promotions. I did at all of the radio stations. This was a radiothon that we did for kids back in Newcastle, and that's where that was the beginning of my big move into local promotions, and the station promoted me big time, and they ran some ads up there and to promote the fact that we were doing these things.
I just wanted to, I wanted to be successful, and I wanted to do something for the community, and I was in a unique position where they would let me. I didn't have to sit and look out the window and say, oh, I wish I could do this or do that. I would go to the right people and just say, hey, I'd like to do this and that. They say, when can you start? Yeah, we want you to do it. What can you do for us? And that made it so much easier. But each time we did that, we created another layer of warm and fuzzy in the community for the radio station. We were more than a radio station. We were part of the community.
As they say, that's my story. And I'm sticking to it.